So nice to see you all coming out tonight. It's quite a wet night, isn't it? So quite brave of you all to turn out. It was easy for me. I just sat in the back of a car and came here. Somebody else did all the driving and having to negotiate the traffic and the wet roads. So sadhu to you all for making this effort. Yeah, so as I was introduced, so I actually came as an anagarika to Chithurst Buddhist Monastery in 1982. And I don't know how you envisage life in a Buddhist monastery. Like maybe in Asian countries, you get up in the morning, go to morning chanting, you go an alms round, then you have the meal, and then you have just a day of just back at your hut, meditating quietly, then you have puja, you come out again. And to a lot of people that sounds quite an ideal sort of life, very peaceful, a lot of time for quiet meditation. But life at Chithurst wasn't like that. Because, in England you need a lot more physical support because it's a cold country. And when the Sangha moved into Chithurst, it was a derelict house. It was almost falling down, a 3-story Victorian house that was in need of a lot of repair. And 30 acres of grounds and a forest, all needing some attention. So life at Chithurst wasn't just getting up, going arms around, coming back and going meditate in your hut all day. It was work. Work and work. Especially in those early days, morning and afternoon work. So, morning meditation, work, meal, bit of a rest, work again. Cup of tea in the evening, then work again. Puja after that, sorry. Yeah. So, when I look back on it, it was all very valuable training and teaching. Yeah. Because, you had to learn how to be more mindful with work. You had to learn, and how to interact more skillfully with people. So, in a monastery, you don't choose the people you live with, or you don't choose the people you want to associate with. So you just, you're with whoever's there, And I must say, in those early days, Lumpur Sameda was very sort of big-hearted and allowed some interesting characters to live in the monastery, you could say. And there was a lot of people came to practice because Lumpur Sameda was a very inspiring teacher, and he'd been out giving talks and people quite inspired to come and stay at Chithurst. So I came there in 1982, and initially I shared a room with 2 others, another anagarika and somebody who was a layman, right? And that was the first challenge, having to share a room with 2 people who had their issues. So one of them was actually a retired Christian vicar. I think he had some trauma. He used to scream out at night. And the other one was a sort of slightly imbalanced anagarika. And he used to go out wandering at night sometimes, and he'd come back in maybe midnight. And sometimes he'd even throw the cat on me. So I had these sort of interesting people to share a room with, right? And I remember one morning, we used to have a rota of which anagarika would do the porridge in the morning. And so we had to get up, start doing the porridge after morning puja about 6:15. On this particular morning, we didn't have a puja, and I came back from into the room at about 7:15. The anagarika, who was sharing a room with me, was still lying there, and he was supposed to be doing the porridge. So I said, "Excuse me, you're on the porridge this morning." And he said, "I'm watching my desire to get up." so interesting characters, eh? So this was all, actually, when I look back, it was all good practice, learning how to be more tolerant around certain types of people. Because that's all part of the practice, learning from, the people that maybe irritate you, the people that you don't see eye to eye with, the people, because you've got all sorts of people in a monastery. And yeah, the skill is how to not get caught into getting a fixed negative mind towards some people in the monastery. Yeah. Now, what I really appreciate, what Lumpur Sumedha would often teach us and remind us about, and we needed reminding about this, was about being aware. Yeah, and being aware of irritations, being aware of negative thoughts, being aware of these things. Yeah, and these are all part of what we experience as a human being. So, be more accepting of these mind states, but just practicing being aware of them. And through that practice, you develop a strength. You develop a ability to be more accepting of these negative mind states. Notice the tendency of the thoughts, but then how to really replace the thoughts with something more skillful. Yeah, to acknowledge a negative mindset, but to be able to reflect on it more skillfully. Yeah, because we can, when we meditate, we can get into a peaceful state. But what happens when we have to go out and interact with people and things come up in the mind? Can we still maintain our practice with that? So there's always a sense of use everything as a practice, even the negative mind states. Because these are all part of what we have to experience as human beings. But the difference, what you develop is there's a difference between being more aware of something than being it. There's a subtle difference, but but this is what one develops. There's a nice teaching by one of Ajahn Chah's teachings, and he's talking about meditation. And he says it's unrealistic to think think that you can just sit down and meditate and get rid of all your thoughts. It's unrealistic because the mind thinks, right? So what Ajahn Chah said, learn how to observe the thoughts, like you'd observe a monkey. The monkey mind, yeah, jumping around, doing this, doing that. Learn to observe. And it's quite nice because Ajahn Chah says by observing the monkey, you don't become the monkey. If you can't observe the monkey, then you become the monkey. Yeah? So this is why Ajahn Chah would encourage us, learn from these experiences. Yeah. So it also reminds me of, I had the wonderful opportunity before I was a monk to meet Ajahn Chah, right? And it was for me it was a very wonderful experience to meet such a wonderful being, And we'd have the meditation. This was in the Hampstead Vihara in London. We'd have a meditation, and then he'd give a talk, and then we'd go downstairs and have a cup of tea with Ajahn Chah. And on one particular occasion, he asked me a question. Right? He liked to ask questions, and he said to me, "What do you think it'd be like to sit there for a whole hour without a single thought coming into your mind?" And what my response was? "Oh, very enlightened," right? And then Ajahn Chah said to me, "Like a stone?" And I think he could sense that my meditation, probably from the expression of my face, was trying to get rid of thoughts, trying to get rid of things, trying to get into some sort of special state. Yeah. So, and that takes a lot of effort, a lot of willpower, and makes meditation quite a workout, actually. Like I hear comments sometimes, oh, the meditation's over, I can think again now. We can get into that sort of way, can't we? But, there's a skillful use of thought. And that's maybe what we have to learn, a skillful use of thought, yeah? How to think wisely. And that can be a benefit, yeah. So, when somebody, does something that irritates us, the tendency of the mind is to go into some sort of critical thought. But, to be aware of that, but then you can start to think somewhere, in another way. Like you can think, well, that person's behaving like that because they're really struggling. They have defilements that they're working with, and they're really struggling. Yeah, we can think a different way, can't we? Be more tolerant of people. Yeah. But people can bring up some very strong negative emotions. So one time, I was when I was in Anagarika, there were two Anagarikas in this small monastery, and the Anagarika I was with didn't like me. Yeah, and it was obvious he didn't like me. I mean, sometimes people don't like each other in a monastery. Something about the way I was that irritated him, and maybe I can. Now I look back, I can see why in a way, But anyway. And he would bring up some really strong, negativity. And once I really felt I wanted to kick him, because it was so strong. But I practiced with it, I tried to be patient with him and try to understand his suffering and his struggles and my struggles. And over time I made more peace with him because I wasn't feeding the negativity and, reflecting more skillfully. And that was strengthening in a way. It is, if one can, be with somebody quite in a peaceful way that once you find very difficult, that's a sign of improvement in your practice, actually. Yeah. So if you're always with people who you like, you get on well with, then sometimes we don't learn certain things, Yeah. And also, I was going through my tidy phase. I was such a messy layperson, mainly because of my mind states were quite messy too, So my room would always be a mess, in my lay life. But, coming to the monastery, a bit more composure of mind, and I started to appreciate tidiness, So I was like, if I had a room, I'd make it tidy. And so this Anagarika I didn't get on with, I had to share a room with him too, right? Because there's only one room for the Anagarikas. And he was very untidy. And so this was, you see, I had to look at my attachment to tidiness. I created this attachment to everything being tidy. And he used to even throw things on my bed, So you learn to be, also you learn to reflect, okay, why am I reacting like this? Yeah, your attachment to everything being neat and tidy. Yeah. So I just, began to I wasn't going to, put the things on his bed, just move them and yeah. And there's also a lot of work to do. We had to do a lot of renovating houses, adapting the lodgings, and so also this to add to all this, having so difficulties relating to the Anagarika. The abbot at the time was keen on getting the building done. Yeah? And I quite I decide like idea of okay, finish work at 5 o'clock, have a cup of tea, then read some Dhamma book, then go for evening puja meditation, right? This ideal sort of life. But he had us working he had us working till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. One occasion he had us working till nearly midnight. And imagine what my mind did around that, you know. Really complaining, grumpy, complaining. But again, the teaching, you know, just to be aware of the mind. Actually, you know, what you're doing is nothing unwholesome. You're helping to build a monastery. You know, it's wholesome work. But the problem is, you know, wanting to do something else, wanting to meditate, rather than using this as your practice, using the work as your practice. So I had to learn to sort of some letting go, and see, well, this is wholesome, you know, to reflect this is good work, it's helping to create the monastery, and, you know, thinking more like this. And that actually, you know, transformed the experience. It became much more just surrendering to just what needed to be done, which was good practice, actually. Yeah. Yeah. Later on, I did learn more lessons about how one's attitude towards something influenced the results of that sort of activity. So one of the things that I hadn't done in my life until I came to the monastery was cleaning toilets. Never. I was always somebody else who did that. You know. So I was given the job of cleaning toilets. And, you know, at Chithurst we used to have this sort of three toilets and 3 showers. Yeah. So I had the morning chore of cleaning the toilets. And at first, I had to clean the toilets. And but I realised that sort of attitude was, you know, it wasn't making it a very pleasant experience. You know, doing it to get out of the way, to get on to the next thing, get to the porridge, the morning porridge. You know, before we did chores, then it was morning porridge. You know. But then I started to reflect. I thought, well, you know, how can I make this a different experience? So I thought, well, how to make these toilets nice for my fellow monastics to use? I started to think like this. So I put more effort and care into making everything, you know, shining the taps, cleaning the sink a bit better, really putting care and attention and doing all the surfaces, clean everything, making it shiny and white. And interesting, I began to enjoy cleaning the toilets. Yeah, with a different attitude, putting more care into what you're doing, being more mindful, careful, and it transformed the experience. So all these things you begin to learn, how the attitude towards what you do affects the result of what you do. So over the years I got more, you know, sort of tolerant about having to work overtime. You know, I'm brought up in the north of England where, you know, people, you have sort of unions and shop stewards and all this sort of thing, and people complain about being exploited and things like this. So, you know, this is. It was good to have, you know, Lumpo Samedo's constant reminder about, okay, don't be idealistic about the mind, you know, just know the way the mind is, but just learn to watch. And there's a difference, there's a difference between being it and watching it, and cultivating that ability to observe. Because, you know, we couldn't just sit and meditate all day. We had a monastery to look after, you know, we had to build, you know, create, you know, renovate a derelict house, you know, and there was a lot of us living in that house because we didn't have all the others, you know, like now we have more kutis in the forest and more outbuildings to live in, but in those days it was limited accommodation we had to share. So we had to learn, you know, to be patient and reflect skillfully and on our reactions to things, and developing the skill of letting go. Yeah. In the Buddha's teachings, we're taught about the levels of wisdom. You probably, you know, if you've studied, you know about Sutta Mayapanya, the wisdom that comes from hearing the Dhamma. Chinta Mayapanya from reflection, and Bhavana Mayapanya from mental cultivation, the different levels of wisdom. And so, sometimes we can hear these wise teachings, but we forget. That person says something that's very irritating to us or behaves in irritating, and we're lost in negative thoughts about them. Yeah. Rather than bringing up a more, awareness of the negative state and reflecting more skillfully. Yeah. So this is the idea of, we have to reflect often on the teachings and remind ourselves. So I was lucky, I had Luang Por Sumedho reminding me a lot about this. It was really helpful, and I was blessed with that. He reminded me a lot, and so I got the message eventually. But if you don't have a teacher all the time, you have to do it yourself. So this is Chintamaya Panya. And if you really reflect a lot on the teachings, then in those situations, those teachings start to come up. You start to be more aware of our reactions, and we start to think more skillfully because we've reflected. These are what we experience as human beings. Now, how to use our thoughts in a more skillful way. Yeah. And that's the difference between, say, like we talk about the fires, don't we, in Buddhism, the greed, hate, and delusion. Now, when a fire arises, there's two things you can do, isn't there? You can put more fuel on it, yeah, or you can put some water on it, yeah. And to me, that's the difference between skillful thought and unskillful thought. If we get caught in certain habits, we tend to keep it's like feeding the fire, putting more sticks on the fire. If we manage to bring up the Buddha's wise teachings and reflection, then it's like sprinkling water on the fire. If we can bring up some wise reflection, and even sometimes just to turn our attention to something else, maybe is like, not putting fuel on it, not sprinkling it, but just allowing it to go out, because we're not feeding it anymore. Yeah. And that's the skill you develop through awareness, really, to be more aware of mind states, how to be more accepting of them, how to investigate and reflect on them more skillfully. And then these things, over the years, I say years as well, they lessen, and the mind naturally becomes more peaceful because you're not holding on to things anymore, yeah. So this is the importance of hearing teachings and reflecting on them. So, and like when you go to a talk, when you go back home, do you reflect on what was said? Or when you go to a teaching, do you reflect when you go home on what is said? And this is part of what the Buddha encouraged: regular reflection on certain themes. Yeah, yeah. Like for in the monastery, we say in one of our chants is, "I am no longer living according to worldly aims and values. This should be reflected upon again and again by one who has gone forth." Just to keep, because we need to remind ourselves, about the teachings and about how to, cultivate skillfulness and abandon unskillfulness. Yeah. And because of that, having to practice like that in that situation, where not so much time for formal meditation. We used to have a month of retreat in January, a month of meditation, and maybe a few weeks in the Vassa of meditation. But except for that, we had to really work to keep the monastery going, to build up, to get it in a suitable place to live in. And you learn to develop a more open awareness, not sort of a focus trying to hold on to an object to keep yourself peaceful, but learn how to be more open and peaceful in different situations. Yeah. Yeah, which I'm grateful for, because now, when I have to travel around and go to different places, one finds one could be more peaceful in different situations. Don't get so much disturbed by things, because you develop this more open awareness. Because, I have some interesting interactions when I'm out in the UK, I think in Asia people are much more polite, but in England it's not always the case, Sometimes people like to test your practice, you could say. Yeah. Yeah. So is it just one example that, so I'm we used to go into London one night a month to give a talk at a Buddhist group in London, and you sort of go in on the train. So you get a train into London and get the underground to the group, and then meet the group, then get the underground back to the station, and then the train back to Petersfield. And so I'm on the underground, right? And, I know, well, I've learned from experience that if I'm in the moment and not, letting the mind go off here and there, you're always prepared for whatever happens, yeah, being in the moment, yeah. So I was sat on the tube and just breathing, being mindfully breathing, And then this guy comes up to me, and he looks at me, and I look up at him, he goes, "Yeah!" Yeah? And then as he's doing that, his friend takes a photograph. So these are the sort of things you have to... But because I was quite composed, I didn't react. I didn't feel any violence. I just looked at him. So I think he might have been a bit disappointed with the photograph, But these are the sort of things that you have to be prepared for, and being called certain names and and just on a previous trip, I was going through Gatwick Airport, and when you go through the sort of, check your baggage and things, or the scanning and things, then you go through like the sensual realm, I call it. It winds you through all these shops, to tempt you with all these things that are around, Well, I'm not so tempted because I haven't got any money, so that doesn't bother me. So I'm walking through this, and I've done a lot of walking meditation over the years, so I just focus on the walking, saying the prayer. Look, I don't look at my feet, by the way. I look ahead, but I'm very aware of my feet touching the earth, because I developed this quite more open walking meditation, not trying to too focus on my feet, but keeping an open awareness. So I'm walking along, and one of the ladies from the stall comes out and gives me a hug. And she says, "Oh, please take me with you." So you just say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that." And then she just asked me some questions, and I try to give her some advice. But always sort of things happen. It wouldn't happen in Thailand, places like this. So these things sort of happen. But some of it's quite good intentioned. But I just find that the more we are mindful in the moment, that it brings a more skillful response. Yeah. So as human beings, we have to experience certain mind states and certain reactions, but it's just developing that awareness of these things. And so even in meditation, if there's things happening, just to cultivate that awareness of it. If there's a lot of thinking or strong moods or unpleasant feelings, just develop that ability to be aware. And it's such a difference when you cultivate that, when you develop that awareness of it rather than being it. I say, watching the monkey rather than being the monkey. And as Ajahn Chah said, once you know one monkey, you know all monkeys. Monkey's not a problem anymore. Yeah. But if you don't want the monkey to be a monkey, that's a problem, isn't it? Yeah. To know the monkey as a monkey. Yeah. And having that more accepting and awareness of these things, a natural cessation of things happens. A natural letting go happens. And over the years of doing that, just the mind naturally becomes more peaceful. And more peaceful in all sorts of situations, because you've learned to understand your reactions and not get caught up in them, and then they don't stick. So you naturally develop this ability to have a more ongoing peaceful mind. Yeah. Yeah. And also, as time goes on, the mind doesn't react to things like it used to anymore. Yeah. But one thing also I to learn is to know, to know the mind that's underlying the way we think. I don't know if this makes sense, but to know what's, because there's the thoughts, but also there's the underlying mind state, isn't there? Yeah, say the hindrance that we might experience, and because sometimes the thoughts can be good, but the mind state is not so good. So just to give an example. So quite a few years ago now, I was in New Zealand with a monk who's coming here very soon, Lumpur Viradamo. Yeah, he was a senior monk there, and I was there after my 5th Vassa as a monk. I went to New Zealand to support Lumpur Viradamo at the Monastery in Wellington, New Zealand. And I never had to give talks. The thing was that until you was a 10 Vassa monk, an Ajahn, you could say that you don't have to give talks, right? Okay. Anyway, it came to pass that the local church invited us to give a talk at like a flower festival, and it seemed a good thing to support because, for good relationships, to have a good friendship with the people in the church, the local church. But Lumpur Viradamo couldn't go for some reason, so he asked me to go. Right? Giving a public talk. You know what they say about public speaking, don't you? It's one of the most fearful things that... So it felt quite a responsibility, to go to the church, and how you're going to come over with the local people. Yeah. Anyway, so the night before, what should I say? So should I say this? Maybe I should say that. Oh, maybe I should say this. And I started thinking about it with quite a peaceful mind in a way, considering. So, and then, should I say this? Should I say that? But suddenly I realized after a while that I was getting really anxious. A lot of anxiety had come up about having to give this talk, right? Now, I also realized that the more I planned the talk, the more anxious I got. Yeah? So the thoughts were good, but it was actually keeping the anxiety going, right? Yeah? And I realized it's just gathering momentum. And also through awareness, you notice this feeling in the stomach as well, that coming with the anxiety, the physical effects. So I thought, I've got to stop planning this talk now. I've got to stop. And I tried to go to the breath, but it had gathered quite a lot of momentum, So I realized I had to, one of the methods the Buddha said was about replacing thoughts with another thought. like the small peg knocking out a big peg. So the reflection I decided to try and use, and I tried to use this with the breath because I realized I had to use some sort of thinking, was just the thought on, like maybe I think you chanted tonight, may I be well, may all beings be well. I tried to use this thought with the breath. So at first, may I be well, may all beings be well, we'll go off to plan the talk again, bring it back. May I be well, may all beings, we'll go off again, bring it back. At first, it was still going the mind was still firstly going more into planning the talk than staying with the reflection on metta, But over time and effort to keep on doing that, eventually he was remembering to the reflection on metta more often than planning the talk. And then things started to calm down. The anxiety started to calm down. So eventually the anxiety went and I could just stay with this reflection. It took a while. But that's how, we develop. We had to, being aware of the mind state, but then trying to bring up a more skillful reflection. And at first, the mind will go into habit, but we keep on making that gentle effort, peaceful effort. Eventually, it's like we empower the mindfulness more and the reflection more than empowering the anxiety. Yeah. And, I don't know what it's like in Malaysia, but anxiety is a big problem for many people in Western countries now. Anxiety about many things. And again, it's always about getting lost in time, isn't it? About the future, what might happen in the future, about what might happen at the talk. How will people respond, and all these sort of concerns. I reflected about the talk. So I did reflect. It was helpful to do some reflection about it, but not to get addicted to that thinking. So we have to plan the future, but it's that sort of addiction to the future and the anxiety about what might happen. Yeah. Rather than just sense of just reflecting, but then just trusting in staying more in the present moment, really. And that's what more mindfulness is about, is staying more in the present moment, isn't it? Rather than living in the future. And a couple of people on this trip have asked me, do you feel concerned about what's happening in the world, all the wars? Yeah. And this is global warming, all these sort of things that, for young people, maybe are quite a source of anxiety about the future. And a lot of these things, I can see, are not in my control. And the way I tend to respond is, well, what you can do is do something good in the present, add something good to the world in the present moment. You can say it's your good karma, right, that you're here able to practice and cultivate good things. It's your good karma. Make the most of that. It's your good karma you're not living in a war-torn country where people are killing each other, And make the most of that and bring goodness into the world. So that's my, thinking is, how can I just do things to bring more goodness into the world rather than dwelling on all the awful things people are doing in the world. And so that's the way I try to cultivate myself and encourage people. It's your good karma that, you have these opportunities. And, different situations will arise for us. And again, situations that bring up maybe sadness, loss of loved ones. Yeah. So again, often when I go to places, people are doing things in memory of loved ones, and some have passed away a long time, some not so long. Yeah. And again, with sadness, there's two ways we can relate to sadness. We can think in terms of, I wish they were still here. I'll try and hold on to them. I wish they'd come back and I could be with them. And that just tends to keep the sadness going, doesn't it? I've lost my parents, But what I found a better way of reflecting was to think in terms of gratitude for what they gave me, and to wish them well on their continuing journey. And this way of thinking doesn't sort of hold on to the sadness, and it actually can create more a sense of loving kindness for your parents and appreciation. Bring something more wholesome up into the mind. Now, maybe at first this is maybe challenging, but if you keep on doing it, it does have its effect. I used to reflect a lot when my father got older, and that one day he was going to pass away, and how I'd respond to that. I accepted the fact that one day he'd pass away, And so I was with him on the day he passed away. And he was in hospital. And I didn't spend the night there. I just got back to where I was staying, and then I got a call saying he just passed away just after I left. So I came back, and I spent the night with him, chanting, meditating. And I really, again, appreciate my Buddhist practice, that I could actually feel metta for him and wish him well in that situation. I never envisioned I would be able to do that. I thought I would be sort of grief-stricken and sad. But actually, I chanted and meditated and felt a lot of metta and gratitude for him. And, from the Buddhist practice. Somebody mentioned recently, and sort of somebody who's having a very difficult time, right? And these are the sort of scenarios that can come up in life. So this particular scenario was a lady, right, who has a son. A Malaysian lady has a son who's transgendered, and in Malaysia that's only son. You imagine now started to dress up as a woman, So very difficult for her, understandably, isn't it? Especially in a country where maybe it's not seen as a good, it's not really so acceptable. In the West, it's more acceptable, And how to work with that, something like that. A person has to go through their karma, and for some people's karma, there's something in their karma. Maybe they've been a woman for many lives. You never know, and now they're in a man's body, and some things haven't adjusted yet, So there's initial reactions, isn't there? And there's reactions about, okay, it's her son and you want her son to be in a certain way, so she has to let go of her ideals about how her son should be and accept him more the way he is. So there's that, letting go. But also reputation as well, isn't it? How other people see it. She has to accept that other people, her reputation, maybe how other people look at her and things. A bit of letting go there too. When I first became a monk, my father was very embarrassed by the way I looked. In England, a man going around in a skirt, So I didn't get invited home for 3 years, because my father would come and see me in the monastery, right? But he wouldn't invite me home, because where they lived was what we call a terraced house, and you had to walk down the street past all the neighbours to get to his house. So it was until after a few years he decided, okay, invite me to visit. Because he was embarrassed about his reputation. So, but that's something the Buddha said to let go of one's reputation can be a powerful practice. Not be bothered what people think. In yourself you're doing something skillful, but not to be trying to do things to please everybody. Sometimes people want you to do not so skillful things to please them, don't they? Yeah. So when I got into my Buddhist practice, you can say, it was a common thing on somebody's birthday at work that we all go to the pub and have a few drinks. That was what you did. So I was I thought, well, I was taking my Buddhist precepts seriously then, and it felt a bit antisocial not to go. So I went and drank orange juice. And they criticised me. Oh, have a pint, not orange juice. Have a proper drink. But no, I said no. I'll just have orange juice. Yeah. So there's that peer pressure to do something to please people, but actually something not so skillful. Yeah. So I had to learn, about I don't have to. What was more important for me was my Buddhist precepts than pleasing people. And you can see this also with conversation, can't you? There's a way of talking that maybe people enjoy, but it's quite frivolous and unskillful. But people can enjoy it, but it's not really skillful, is it? So this is what I, began to practice. Yeah. So, and also with speech, like backbiting. Yeah, because. It happens in monasteries too, but in my working life, at first, you get into a backbiting session about somebody, one of the bosses at work who wasn't very nice, something like that. But as I meditated more, I feel like, after I get into this conversation, I feel good. Let the bad taste in the mind. I could begin to experience the effects of getting into a negative conversation about somebody. So what I decide to do, when people come in the office and start talking negatively about somebody, I notice the tendency to want to say something myself, but I just develop the ability just to listen, let them talk. Yeah. And they say what they want to say. I go, okay, yeah. And then because I wasn't getting into the conversation, they wouldn't stay very long. And which was good, because I could get on with my work then, get the job done. So this is, the skill you begin to learn. You see the effects of certain behaviours, yeah, and through the awareness, actually, through the awareness of how things affect us, yeah, and that just helps us to steer our life in a more skillful way. So one of the definitions you can say of bhavana mayapanya is to know what leads to wholesomeness and goodness, and what leads to very clear about, and what leads to going down, unskillfulness, and also with that strength of mind, the strength of mind to cultivate the skillful and abandon the unskillful. A very clear awareness of that we can develop through that bhavana mayapanya, and you say it's a natural quality of peacefulness that comes, from living more with awareness. Gradually we become more aware of things, and more peaceful, clear, and then this natural understanding comes. The way of growth we see, and the way of decay we see, and we have the strength to cultivate the way of growth and skillfulness. So I think I'll offer these reflections this evening.